This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. And on the phone tonight, we have none other than a multiple-time opponent, both in arm wrestling and wrestling, of the recently deceased WWE Hall of Famer superstar Billy Graham. None other than Oregon pro wrestling legend and hopefully one day future WWE Hall of Famer. They'll have to put you in there eventually. Billy Jack Haynes. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good, Hannibal, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that Hall of Fame. Colin Valley Club, maybe, but Vince McMahon, absolutely. I would not want to be inducted, and I'll go on record as saying that right now.
There you go. Well, I don't blame you. But as far as Billy Graham, I know you guys have a long history together, and he just passed away last week after long health battle and being in the hospital for 4 months. All of his organs finally failed. Where did you want to start with your relationship and memories of him?
Well, I like to start back at the beginning. I feel that, I should give an over-the-phone eulogy since I can't be in person. I can just imagine, Vince McMahon would probably be there, Ric Flair, so forth, and who knows, it'd probably be a real brawl there, and we don't want that. This is about superstar Billy Graham and the greatness of the man, and I just want to be over the phone with you. I feel the greatest, you're the greatest promoting pro wrestling with Hannibal TV. I mean, they're getting no sure these days, but they haven't been down the road like we have. They can comment all they want, criticize all they want, but until they wrestle 340 nights out of a year in a plane on the road, almost daily injured, all they can do is comment. They can't really get in the ring. They've never been in there. You have.
That's for sure. And Billy actually was on this channel a lot and had a good relationship with me right up until the end. So he would definitely approve of you saying something about him on this channel.
Okay, let's see where we're going to start. First of all, there's never been a more kinder human being than Billy Graham to myself and to my father that a lot of people don't know about. But let's start back when in the boxing days. Billy was a boxer, like I was, and he was also. I think he suffered from some abuse. He told me. Now this is in the '80s, so I don't know really about that. Just what Billy told me.
He did suffer from abuse. Yes, he did. You're right.
Yeah, and Hannibal, it's really tough to talk about that because you love your parents so much, you don't want to really talk about it. But he told me a little bit about that. But let's go back to the point. I followed Billy when he was bodybuilding with Arnold Schwarzenegger and lifting down there. I know he's from Arizona, but he went to California, and I know that he was just go back to the. I think he was in Mr. Olympia or close to it if he wasn't, with the best arms.
Mr. America. Mr. America. I believe.
So he won the Mr. America contest?
For best arms he did, yeah.
Right. Well, he had legitimately 22-inch arms. And so he won the best arms even over Schwarzenegger and those guys. So I followed him, Hannibal, and at that time in my life, I was going through some heavy-duty stuff. This isn't about me tonight. This is about superstar Billy Graham. So I followed his career, and I know that he tried out for football, for the Canadian Football League, and bodybuilding. And I know he bench pressed 550, 600 pounds. I just said to myself, I dreamt one day I'd like to get in the ring and be a superstar Billy Graham. Of course, I was doing other things, but my uncle knew Wahoo McDaniel when he was playing for the Jets. So, I mean, I met Wahoo before I ever got into professional wrestling politically. So it's that's another story on its own. But Blackjack Mulligan, Harley Race, and Billy Graham are the three that stand out to me. And it's just, Billy was everything I wanted to be as growing up. And he was in. I remember there was a promotion with the WWF and the NWA, and I didn't mention Harley Race, but they wrestled in Miami in the Super Bowl. I'm not sure. I think it was in 1978. WWF and WWF and NWA. You know anything about that?
I think he wrestled in the Orange Bowl in Florida for it was a cross promotion with Eddie Graham and his NWA and Vince McMahon Sr., I believe.
Okay, well then at that time, let's enter me now. I'm in professional wrestling 1982, 10 years before I broke in 82. In 72, I believe it was, Billy Graham broke in with Stu Hart. So we were 10 years apart, and it was Stu Hart. And when in 84, when I met Billy in person for the first time ever, we just hit it off really well. And Eddie Graham was the promoter, and they had the Super Bowl there in Tampa. A lot of things were going on, and Billy got in a little bit later, and then Dusty Rhodes, who was doing the booking, lined Billy and I up. I had won the title from Kendo Nagasaki, and Billy took it off me in an arm wrestling match. I couldn't wrestle because, remember the angle we worked in arm wrestling?
Yeah, someone was asking who won that. I think it was a schmoz, but maybe you could refresh our memory.
Well, it was all the work, of course, but Billy was just fantastic. You told me about this being on YouTube, and I actually watched it for the first time a month or two ago, and that's when Billy was getting really sick, and we had kept in contact, and the angle was worked really well, except for I think it was Oliver Humperdinck got in the way at the end, but it's just working with him, and as a man. And he was 40 years old. I was 30. I was in my prime. I had 21 inch arms at the time. He had 22 in his prime. And it was unbelievable that 4 years later, or 6 years later, pardon me, I got to wrestle superstar Billy Graham in the Super Bowl wrestling, or the Orange Bowl, Full Nelson versus Full Nelson in June of 1984. And 6 years earlier, Harley Race wrestled him in the same Orange Bowl. They won, I think, an hour draw, NWA versus WWF, old school. And so it was quite an honor for me to meet Billy and wrestle him. And I think, like I said at the beginning, I love eulogizing Billy because of all the wrestlers I met, and there's been some great ones. Blackjack Mulligan, like I said, Harley Race, Walter McDaniel. Billy Graham, to me, was just the kindest. Everybody always says that when somebody passes away, he's the greatest guy. Well, I always had a soft spot for Billy. And in 1986, 87, we were in the WWF together. And I ended up opening my gym the end of was September 13th, 1987, and Billy, I think about a month later, we had we wrestled in Portland, Oregon, and he was at the gym working out, and my dad was sick, and Billy, said, "Well, how far away is he?" And I said, "Well, he lives in Portland. I'm in Oregon City, and there's a nurse taking care of him right now because I was on the road." And he goes, "I'd love to meet your father." And there's never been a professional wrestler other than Stan the Man Stasiak and Rip Oliver that have ever done that. And so I drove Billy over to meet my dad. And it was very, very emotional for me. And my father as well, because he was blind and he had an amputee in a wheelchair with juvenile diabetes. And Billy spent, no exaggeration, at least an hour with my dad, and he shook hands, and he, felt Billy Graham's biceps, and he just treated my dad like a royalty, and that's something I never, ever, ever forgot. And then, you know what I mean, Hannibal? I mean, you can never forget a situation like that.
Yeah, and there's not that many people that would do that with a dying person. That's not even a wrestler, let alone a dying wrestler.
Yeah, and it just meant a lot to my father, and it meant a lot to me. And Billy, now later on down the road, I had my problems that everybody knows about now, and but Billy and I, we hooked up again on the phone in 1992, and we were talking, and we were on hard copy. I believe it was hard copy together with myself, Dr. D, David Schultz, and Superstar Billy Graham, speaking out about Vince McMahon and what goes on behind the scenes. And then all of a sudden the Donahue show come up, and I was going to be on the Donahue show. And this, pardon my language, this chicken shit Vince McMahon Jr. told Donahue that he would not appear if Billy Jack Haynes was on the show. So I never got to go on with Superstar Billy Graham, and I think Dr. D was there. But that's the reason I wasn't on that. And
I don't know if Dr. D was on that, but Dave Meltzer was, I think.
Well, that's great, Dave Meltzer.
And Barry O too.
Who the hell was he?
I don't remember, but I seem to recall Barry O, who's now dead as well. Randy Orton's uncle was also there.
No, I honestly did not know Barry Orton was dead.
Yeah, he died a while ago. I'll look it up.
Well, I'm sure sorry to hear that, boy. Bob Orton and Bob was a great guy and a fantastic wrestler. And I'm so sorry to hear about that. I did not know. And so many wrestlers have died, Hannibal. How can you keep track of them all?
He died March 19th, 2021.
Yeah, well, God bless him. I'm sure sorry about that. Billy was one of a kind. He did it all. I mean, he was an athlete, a boxer. He used to, he even told me one time he used to make money on the side, like I did when I was young, by, beating people up. And so it's just, we had everything in common. We mirrored each other. So, but we were 10 years apart. And so when I went down in 82, it was basically for another reason, but I wanted to see if I could make it as a professional wrestler. And after about a month and a half, I said, no, I'm done. And came back with Duke Myers to Portland, Oregon, because Duke lived in Portland. And Duke and I go back a long way. And I know he passed away as well. But Billy, meeting Billy was a real big deal for me as my idol growing up. And then to actually wrestle him, like I said, when Harley wrestled him in, I think it was February of 78 in the Orange Bowl, I got an opportunity to wrestle him in 1984 in the Orange Bowl. And at that time, he put me over. But, honestly, man, I feel bad about doing it because it just, at first I wasn't receptive to it because I loved him so much. But he took me to the side and he said, listen, Billy, this is business. This is what happens. Yeah, it's just a work, but it's my turn to put you over because at that time, they were pushing me like gangbusters in Florida. And unfortunately, I was going another direction. But I finally agreed to it, and he put me over. And I think Don Shula was our timekeeper, if I'm not mistaken. But you can imagine the honor that was for me. And to have your childhood idol, you end up wrestling him. and he meets your dad. And so I want to just tell the whole world, Superstar Billy Graham, to me, was the all-around greatest athlete and human being that professional wrestling has ever had. Now, he'll be eulogized by a lot of people, but I don't think he could be any deeper than my eulogy over the phone with you. That's how much I love this man, and I just don't know what else to say to anybody listening on your show.
Well, his wife could very well hear this. I'll make sure that she gets the link. Valerie, did you ever meet her? Was she in Florida when he was there?
I never got a chance to meet Valerie, but I know one thing for a fact, that Superstar Billy Graham loved Valerie with all his heart. And, I always wanted to, and I don't know if Valerie ever heard about Billy coming to visit my dad, but I hope she listens to this and understands just how much it meant to me as a human being, because I love my dad, was my number one person in the world. And my wife and my dad are the only really two people I've ever truly loved with all my heart. And Billy, to me, is number three. That's how deep it went with me.
I don't know if you ever saw this because you were a face too, but he told me that even back in the strict kayfabe days, he would still be nice to fans when he was a heel as well, just because he didn't have it in his heart to tell them to go F themselves or whatever, like a lot of the heels did in those days.
Yeah, back in those days, Hannibal, even if you were caught riding together, and I believe Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik, when I was in the WWF, got caught in the same car, and they were suspended by Vince Jr., and he was right, to do that at that time, because kayfabe was going around pretty good. Even though Vince ended up exposing the business, he was pretty strict about that.
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. You told me this, but in the picture where you guys are arm wrestling each other, that I'll put up for the fans right now, you told me both of your arms were the same. You measured them before on this day. Is that correct?
Yeah, at that time, we were both about 21 inches. When I was weighing 290, I had close to 21 and a half. And Billy, at his peak, was 22. So at that time, I think we were both 21 and a half. But Billy had the best arms in his prime that I think I've ever seen on a human being. I don't know. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Around the late 70s there, I've never seen arms like that on anybody. But there's a fan on here that wants to know, I mean, a lot of wrestlers took stuff from Billy Graham over the years, like Jesse Ventura, Hulk Hogan, Scott Steiner. Did you take anything? Obviously, your gimmick was totally different, but was there anything that you learned from him that you took into your persona or wrestling style?
Well, the whole thing, like you, I'm a naturally born heel. They had me as a baby face, and if I would have turned heel, I would have been a much better wrestler, because I wanted to be a heel, and I got a chance to in 1995 against Brad Armstrong in the. In fact, I seen that on TV the other day myself in 1995, a few months ago, against Brad Armstrong when I was a heel. It was Super Bowl of Wrestling, and it was August 4th, 1995. And I just loved to be a heel. But to go back to what you said about Billy being nice, I was the same way. You know, when I turned a heel in Portland, the fans, I was so screwed up on painkillers, and it hurt so bad because I tried to keep it from my father. And I did the best I could, but fans were crying. They loved me so much in Portland because that's my hometown. And I did the same thing. I took them to the side and told them it's all a work. I love you. Don't be mad at me. And so I understand what you're saying about Billy.
Yeah, I think he actually wanted to be a babyface more than a heel during the peak of his babyface run. Instead of them going to Backland, he would have preferred that they just made him the babyface champion at that point in time. He had natural heel aspects too to his personality, but a lot of people think he could have done as good or better as Hogan at that point if they had just had Ivan Koloff turn on him and made him the face instead of putting the title on Backlund.
Right. I was talking with Wahoo now. A year later, I came back to Florida, and I teamed up with Wahoo McDaniel, who another fantastic human being. I mean, great guy. And he told me about the feud that he had in the 70s, early 70s with Billy Graham and the WWF. And Wahoo and I just had great times talking about superstar Billy Graham and the matches they had. And, the thing is, Billy's told me he was part Cherokee Indian and Wahoo Choctaw, and I was part Modoc. So, there's all types of things going on with Black Lives Matters and all that. I agree semi with that, but if anybody should be getting paid money, it should be the American Indian, man. They were millions and millions and millions killed as everybody drove west, but Indians got a lot of pride, and they just don't do that. They just take the territory they're given, and that's it. But I don't mean that to be a racy issue, because racism was bad back in the day, but none like the American Indian went through. But we should all unite together as the United States and put America first. That's the way it should be, man.
And just about if Billy inspired you at all, would you say maybe you mentioned earlier he had the best arms ever? Were you kind of inspired just to get a physique similar to his after you first saw him, because he was one of the first to really have those big muscles? I know Buddy Rogers was muscular and stuff, but not to that level.
Well, I didn't know about steroids at that time. I was working out like uh, 4 or 5 days a week, maybe sometimes 6, and running, and I was sparring. And also, Billy, I forgot to tell you, Billy had met Jerry Corey in California, and he was one of my sparring partners, one of the guys that used to beat the living crap out of me. And but he knew Jerry Corey and Mike Corey and the Corey family, so we had that in common as well. But I didn't know steroids was the thing, because I was working out, and my best bench without steroids was about 385. And then I got on steroids, and I honestly did a set of 20 with 405, but that's with quick reps. Quick rep wasn't legal. But my best bench was about 560 on steroids. So if you weren't on steroids, you couldn't compete with Schwarzenegger and those guys. But Billy, the steroid issue came up, and of course Billy took them, I took them, and 90% of the guys took them, and the other 10% are probably lying.
Yeah, there was very few in the 80s that didn't take them. The other thing was a lot of people blame all of his physical issues on steroids, which, okay, maybe they might have some, but you guys were wrestling so much back then. And yeah, wrestling's predetermined, but it takes a big toll on your hips, your back, your knees, your neck. I can say that. And I never wrestled nearly as much as either of you guys. So would you say all of his issues would have been from steroids, or do you think the decades that he wrestled for may have also contributed to it?
That's really a good question, Hannibal. I think it's probably 50-50. Billy's interview was the best ever, but yeah, he took a pounding in his career, and especially in his younger career. And I don't know. I can't say for sure. I'm not an expert in that field of steroids, but I sure took a lot of them. Ask Hulk Hogan. He'll tell you. I mean, he's pretty much beat up, I guess. He's had a lot of surgeries and so forth, but getting back to the gimmick, there is a lot of people. It's a compliment to Billy Graham, actually, that you mentioned 3-4 wrestlers that not stole his gimmick, but liked Billy or loved Billy enough, knew he got over, and to use Billy's gimmick to get themselves over. That's a compliment to superstar Billy Graham. I don't want to put anybody down for that. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, he actually told me in an interview that was what he was actually most proud of. He was most proud of Jesse, actually, of his mentor, but that Hogan and Jesse became two of the biggest stars ever, and they were inspired by him. And then even Scott Steiner in later years was as well. But he took pride in that, and he would have had a good gimmick infringement case against Hulk Hogan, in my opinion, because some of the, like, calling the biceps pythons and brothers and ripping the shirts and ear cupping like Billy first started. I think Billy even used Eye of the Tiger first. A New York fan recently told me so. Like, in today's wrestling world, you could never rip off a wrestler like that so blatantly and get away with it with the internet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hogan did take pretty much every trait that Superstar had. And, I'm not a big Hulk Hogan fan. It just tell the truth. That's all he's got to do, but he can't do that. But he made it to the top, and you got to scrape to do that and do the best you can. And it's just a point that, once again, Hogan knew that Billy had every tool, just like you do. You had every tool. If it wasn't for hepatitis C, in my opinion, I've said this several times, you'd have been a big, big star in this industry, Hannibal.
Well, of course, that's actually something that you had at one point, Billy too, and a lot of wrestlers had hepatitis and just never went public about it. I even read the other day on Gerald Briscoe's Wikipedia, and Gerald wrestled Abdullah before too, that he had it at one point. I know Bushwhacker Luke had it at one point. Jacques Rougeau had it. Hangman Bobby Jaggers. A lot of people just never came out about it, but all those blood matches, that'll do it.
Yeah, it's amazing that I don't know if they're using the razor blade today. Are they using the razor blade still today?
They started again, yeah. Mostly in AEW, which I know you haven't watched much, but AEW is doing it, and WWE, they're allowing blood again, but it's hard way. They're allowing intentional hard ways, it seems, here and there.
So hard way juice, you mean they're shooting on each other, they're not using the razor?
Brock Lesnar's doing it, apparently intentionally ramming his head into metal objects to get it, because they don't want to get exposed for potentially having that scripted into the matches, because with other matches, they'll stop matches if blood occurs. But there have been a bunch, 3 involving Brock Lesnar, where they've allowed it, and they had a pay-per-view over the weekend where there was blood in some of the matches, but it wasn't from blading. It was just from wrestlers getting cut. But it wasn't from, it wasn't crazy blood or anything. But WWE, they seem to be laying back on stopping the matches for blood, because AEW is using blood a lot. Like, they're using blood pretty much every week, from what I can tell.
Well, there's that old saying in pro wrestling, Hannibal, that red makes green.
Yeah.
And if they're going back to it, that's up to them, I guess. But
they're doing testing, though. I'm sure they're doing testing, where back in the 70s and 80s, I'm positive you guys were never tested, unless it was for a commissioned state.
No, you're right. And you're probably right too about the hepatitis C. I mean, everybody, we were drinking blood back then, and in WrestleMania 3, if you go back to the tape against Hercules Hernandez, I'm the only one that bled in the entire event because we worked an angle with the chain matches afterwards. And I bled pretty bad, and that's when the Rock Hudson thing and was it HIV? It just came out. And when I slapped my head back, and blood went all over the front row, and people were, I don't know if you catch it on TV, but people I saw were actually kind of standing up out of the way, trying to get out of the way of it. From my angle on my back, anyway.
Yeah, Billy always claimed that he got it from wrestling because he did say he took steroids, but he wasn't using used needles. You could get those at a pharmacy, and definitely he was making enough in those days to not be like borrowing other people's needles. But there's a lot of double blood matches of Billy on tape, and he wrestled Abdullah 9 times as well.
Well, you know firsthand about that with Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah.
He had hepatitis C, and I did read where you got some justice in that. At least I know you didn't get no financial reward, but you know you came out on top 1,000,000 to 1 over that, and I was very proud of you at that moment.
Well, Billy was a big guy pushing me to get justice in that because he had seen an Indian, as you mentioned, Indians. Wrestle Abdullah in Calgary back in the 60s, I guess, and Abdullah had taped a razor blade onto a popsicle stick and just sliced the crap out of this Indian. And he just thought that was the most brutal thing he ever saw in wrestling, that this Indian making like $30, indigenous person, Native American, whatever you want to call them, back in the 60s, they were called Indians, but like, he never really liked Abdullah much after that because he thought that he went nuts cutting this guy up on his arms, on his face, everywhere, to the point that an ambulance had to take him away.
Well, I believe that if anybody had a razor blade or a cutting problem, like a lot of people are sick, cut themselves with razor blades just to bleed, or it's kind of a sickness. If anybody had it, it was Abdullah the Butcher. And Dusty Rhodes, too, a little bit. He used to cut his shoulders and arms and so forth.
Actually, Billy Graham said that about Dusty in an interview. He said that he believed that Dusty actually had like a fetish for cutting himself. Like he loved cutting himself.
Yeah, and then you can throw Bruiser Brody in that mix, too. If you look at Bruiser Brody's forehead, it's just unbelievable how many he must have just went to the bone. I did that in 1984 against Billy. I hit a pumper on that front cover magazine. I don't know if you have that one.
Yeah.
I got blood all over the back of Billy's neck. He says, "My God, man, I just was pumping blood everywhere." And I about passed out in the back in the dressing room afterwards. We were hugging each other after the match. And I had to sit down and drink orange juice in the Orange Bowl.
And I know that there was probably no doctors backstage then other than in commission states.
No, Hannibal, there was no doctors. And there was no doctors in Vince's, in the WWF either. I don't know where the doctors come into play. We never seen them. But if you complained about any injury with Vince McMahon Jr., if you weren't a Hulk Hogan, you were expendable. Maybe a Randy Savage or Hulk Hogan. But anybody other than that, if you didn't wrestle, you had somebody waiting in the wings to take your spot, man. So you just had to suck it up and go. We were like Yankee Doodle Dandy going to the airports every day. Half awake, people looking for an autograph, and you just walk right by them or try and sign it as you walk, and you just were like zombies back then.
Now, in those later years when Billy Graham was towards the end in WWE, where I understand he's still at a MSG sellout against Butch Reed, and I understand that Hulk Hogan actually never matched Billy Graham's percentage of sellouts, which was 95%, and it was higher then too, 21,000. Now they say it's sold out at 12,500. But I was going to ask you, could you see the pain Billy was in those days with his hips, and he's just really making himself do this because he really needed the money, or was he hiding that?
Well, I can tell you this for a fact because we were in the WWF together in '86 and '87. Now, Billy May came in '87. I was there in half of '86 and all of '87. And Billy, at that time, Vince would not give me any push at all. I remember we were in San Francisco, and I seen a picture on YouTube with Bam Bam Bigelow, myself, I believe that Blackjack Mulligan, Billy Graham, and Don Morocco with Vince McMahon sitting down at a shooting.
The Pile Driver album. You guys were in that together.
Correct. But Billy never got the push with Vince Jr. With Vince Sr. loved him, and he loved Vince Sr., and that's why Billy never, deep in his mind, you know as well as I do, he couldn't effing stand Vince McMahon Jr. I understood it. He had to, kiss his ass to get money. He hated doing that because Billy's not an ass kisser. But Vince should have just taken care of him. But, he should have taken care of a lot of the boys that helped him start this business, but he never did. He's a billionaire now, more power to him. But Billy's a damn good example of what you just said. He, made him feel like a piece of shit there when I was there in '87. Billy was at 43, 44 at that time, and I was 33, 34. So Vince never used him properly. And going to Ventura, I don't want to leave him out. I also really liked Ventura. He was a great guy. Tried to get a union, and Hulk Hogan blocked it after WrestleMania 3. And then he goes on to become governor. So actually, I think Ventura is one of the most highly successful professional wrestlers in the history of the sport.
Yeah, and he was also in a lot of big-time movies like Batman, Predator, Running Man. He had an underrated movie career. But one interesting thing I heard in an interview with Billy is Dusty actually tried to bury him in the NWA when Billy wrestled for Crockett. He had Billy job in 5 Minutes to the Barbarian. He had him job at a Starrcade to Sam Houston. So it's like Dusty was trying to make sure Billy didn't get over when Billy went to Crockett. That was right before Billy went back for Vince McMahon, where he said he just left due to that reason, that they weren't going to push him at all.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but I was in that Starrcade '85 as well with Wahoo McDaniel against Ole and Arn Anderson. And we were the Florida, where was it? We were U.S. champions. They were the NWA champions, and Wahoo had to do the job there, and I volunteered to do the job too because I couldn't handle Crockett. Crockett was kept me from the world title, and it's just all politics. And Billy left about the same time I did, because you're exactly right. I'm the one that threw the table and Crockett up against the wall, and the picture came down on Crockett's head, and I left. And Billy left about that same time. And then we caught up again in the WWF after that, 86, 87. But Crockett was an ass-kiss piece of shit for Flair, and that's the gospel truth. It's all the work, it's all politics. And
yeah, Billy mentioned that Flair had a...
They can write what they want. They can write what they want, but they've never been down the road like we have. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, Billy mentioned that Flair got a helicopter on that Starrcade, and he was jobbing to Sam Houston. And he said he liked Sam Houston, but he went on to sell out Madison Square Garden after that. So it's not like his name was nothing. And look what Sam Houston. I personally am friends with Sam Houston, but that just shows you that they didn't want Billy to get over there.
I agree 100%. I like Sam Houston too. I know he's the brother to Jake the Snake, fantastic wrestler, great guy. And yeah, you're right. Dusty did not want him getting over, and Dusty did not want me getting over. And that's just the way it was. Dusty, had a tremendous ego in this business, but he made it on charisma, and people believed in him. He was like Billy in a way too, with on the mic. He was phenomenal, charismatic, but he couldn't wrestle for shit. And but he made it. His sons made it. So you got to pat him on the back. You can't kiss ass everywhere. You got to tell it the way it is. That's what I try and do. And people, they can say what they want about me, but I'll tell you the truth. And until you've been in that ring like you and I have, been down that road, people could talk on podcasts, and I just don't like that because they have never been there and done that and know the actual pain, agony, and the drug addiction that comes down the road with this business. It's not just me. It's 95% of the wrestlers got hooked on drugs because of pain, not just for recreation, Hannibal. No.
Yeah, and I was actually telling a non-wrestler this the other day that back in the 80s and 70s, it's not like today. If you got hurt, as you said earlier, you still had to wrestle or you didn't get paid. So you, in a way, you almost had to take pills to still earn your living while the injury was healing. But sadly, it led to a lot of addictions.
Well, how, you know what? Let's put it this way. Now you're going to hear, my autobiography is basically out, but it's not there yet. But I have an attorney here in Portland, Oregon that has it. And so if anything does happen to me, it will come out. But the point is very clear here. Politics. If you think that this McMahon's wife spent $1 billion on a campaign to become senator, you know what she had in mind, and that was to run for the presidency of the United States. And no one will tell me different. Because Donald Trump went right after him, and then Linda McMahon worked for the Trump organization. So politics was involved in the McMahon family. And I remember a video that said there was a balloon she was trying to find after she lost the Senate seat in Connecticut, was trying to find Vince Jr., her husband, and says, Vince is right here by my side. And she looks, and he's nowhere around. He's way up in the crowd. A little bubble pops up and goes, $1 billion fucking dollars. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't. I know Vince is dating other women now, though. I think they're separated. I don't think they're divorced, but Vince has been seen around with someone at least several decades younger than him. But whatever, he can do whatever he wants. As far as Billy Graham, I was telling people, like, I knew he had pain pill addiction. He very, very rarely drank. He wasn't an alcoholic, and he wasn't like a cocaine user. I know he used speed, which most wrestlers did back then. I've even heard Ricky Steamboat say he used speed to get up for matches. But did you see about that with Billy too? That he wasn't really a partier. He was a pain medicine guy and here and there speed. But did you see him at the bars or anything ever?
To me, a lot in common also with superstar Billy Graham was Roddy Piper. Roddy was, Roddy liked his medication, so forth, but he's one of those guys who never partied around and cheated on his wife. And to the best of my knowledge, I never seen Billy Graham do any speed, anything. I never seen him use a drug, not around me. And I tell you if he did, but he did not. One of the reasons why I really respected him, Piper, and the Honky Tonk Man as well. So I never seen it, Hannibal.
Yeah, I've actually never heard any stories, and I've heard a lot of stories about Billy. I've been doing shoot interviews for a long time now. I'm the number one YouTube shoot interviewer, and I've never heard one story about Billy cheating on his wife. So as far as I know, and this is rare in wrestling, as you know, in wrestling, especially in the 70s and 80s, if you cheated on your wife a lot, that would actually make you seem cool as a wrestler, because that's just the way it was. That's why Ric Flair has been married 5 times but claims he had sex with 10,000 women, because that was like something to brag about. But Billy was never the type to do that or go around bragging about stuff like that.
Well, some guys live their gimmick, and Flair and Hogan are two that does that. You got a family life, and you have a wrestling life. You really have kind of a double persona there. So you're a wrestler, and it's hard to get out of that gimmick. I admit it. It was hard for me too, but you have to do it. When you come home, you got to be the husband, and on the road, you got to be the wrestler. So you got a double personality, Hannibal. That's what pro wrestling really is.
Well, and I won't digress too much into Hogan and Flair, but apparently Hogan is now selling weed and magic mushrooms legally, but that's what he's doing for money now, and Flair's selling weed. So neither of them benefited from all their divorces, I don't think, if they're still having to work and do all these side businesses in their I don't know if Hogan's 70 yet, but he's got to be pretty close if he's not. Flair definitely is in his 70s.
I can tell you right now, Hogan and I are only a month apart. Hogan will be 70 August 11th of this year, and I'll be 70 July 10th. So we're a month apart. But I don't want to ever honestly belittle any professional wrestler because it's a tough business. And if you can make it, he made it, Flair made it. It's just a point that I called Flair a pedophile last time. I stand by my statements. Anytime he wants to do a three-way conversation with us, that's wide open. But as far as living the gimmick, you can't live it 24 hours, and that's what those guys do. You just cannot do it.
You mentioned some of your lifts compared to Billy, but there's a fan on here that wants to know, in your opinion, between the two of you in your primes, who would have been the stronger one from what you've seen from yourself and him? I don't know if you ever saw him lift in his prime because he, as you said, he was 10 years older than you.
Well, Hannibal, I also remember, I did mention this, another thing that made me really idolize Billy as a wrestler. He was in the world's strongest man competition. And I know he finished pretty high. I know he didn't win it, but to be in the world's strongest man, you got to be pretty darn strong. So I couldn't compete with Billy on strength. Billy was far superior to me, and athletic-wise maybe, but he was brutal. I was working with Schwarzenegger. He bodybuilded against Frank Zane. I think he idolized Mr. Hercules, Steve Reeves. Was one of his idols, he told me. And so, no, I cannot compete with superstar Billy Graham, and that's what this is really all about tonight. He's just one of those guys that pro wrestling will never see again. There'll never be another superstar Billy Graham. Never. Ever, ever, ever. Hulk Hogan couldn't carry his jockstrap, in my opinion. But, people remember Hulk Hogan over Billy Graham, but not me. And I hope a lot of fans will never, ever forget superstar Billy Graham. To me, he was the greatest pro wrestler and the greatest human being outside of the ring ever.
And as far as that pile driver video shoot that you did with the superstar Hogan and Vince and Morocco, do you have anything to tell us from behind the scenes? Because this is the first time I've ever talked to you about it. I forgot that you were in that until you mentioned it, but of course they were pushing you hard then.
Well, Vince and I were butting heads because I wanted to turn heel, and that was all I thought arranged for WrestleMania 4 at Trump Plaza. I was going to turn heel with Full Nelson, but you mentioned Ricky Steamboat. The political side to that was I was working an angle with Randy Savage for WrestleMania 3, and just like maybe 6 weeks out of it, maybe 2 months out of it, Vince came to me and said that I'm working with Hercules and that they're going to put the strap on Ricky Steamboat, the Intercontinental belt. So I didn't bitch or complain about it. I got a real nice payday, but it's not the point. It's once again the politics. And I was already making so much money doing my other thing, but I didn't care. It wasn't the ego wasn't in me to I want to be world champion. It's just the political side in the business can be absolutely brutal behind the scenes.
Yeah, I know that firsthand, but I think that may have been one of the first ever wrestling music videos, other than I know they did Land of 1,000 Dances and maybe some Hulk Hogan stuff, but as far as like Pile Driver, what was going through your head shooting like a music video at a construction site that day?
Yeah, okay, let me get my head wrapped around that. Let me look back.
Because it was you, Billy.
1986.
Yeah.
'86 in San Francisco, I think it was. And Honky Tonk Man was doing a video, I think. What wasn't he? Was it Honky Tonk Man?
Yeah, it was. It all came in like a VHS cassette, but those videos have so many views on the internet now. They're more famous now than ever.
Yeah, Honky Tonk Man and Jimmy Hart was his manager, and I know we stayed up all night to get to production, and I got to give, once again, tell the truth. Vince did a tremendous job on this, and his mind, he's an absolute genius. There's no question about it, but he just didn't have the heart to take care of the boys. That's where I've always had the problem with Vince, where Vince Sr. loved the boys, and then Grandpa, there wasn't a racist bone in his body. In fact, I think he had a black baseball team. So as it went down from Grandpa to his father to Vince lied to his dad on his deathbed, said he would never, ever go into anybody's territory. And when Vince Sr. died in Fort Lauderdale, I think it was, Florida, when I was down there, Vince basically took over, and the rest is history. You can agree with me or not, but if I told my dad something on his deathbed, I would never go against it, but he did. And look what, he's a billionaire because of it.
I don't want to go down this road too much, but Ken Patera also said in an interview over the weekend with another reporter that does interviews with me that Vince's dad may have bailed him out from some issues he had with money that he had borrowed from the mafia at various points. Did you ever hear about that?
Well, I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to, but I know exact details of how if Vince didn't pay back this money, Vince wouldn't be around today. So it was, it was real heavy. There's a guy named Lenny Montana, and I just wanted everybody to look up Lenny, because he was also, I met him. He could actually be my biological father as Vince Sr., and everybody will find out about how that took place. But I don't know. My real father was my blind dad who raised me, and that's it. I never want to take anything away from him. But it's a good question. I really don't know how to answer it. I honestly don't.
And as far as, I think Oliver Humperdinck and Bam Bam Bigelow were also in this music video. In between takes, are you guys goofing around or anything, or is it all business? For that,
I think one thing I didn't mention Don Morocco, because Morocco was really one of the. You look at Morocco, he had one hell of a body, and he worked out hard, and he was there, and Don was a great guy too. We all just had a lot of fun. You can kind of tell. Well, I think I was eating an apple. We were all eating apples and taking bites out. We were also burned out from the road too. So being there was a lot of fun. But it's just a long time ago, and I just can't remember too much about it.
I guess you wouldn't remember the payoff either.
The payoff for the video?
Yeah. Would it have been more than wrestling?
For me? Are you talking about for me?
Yeah.
Or it wasn't much. I think it was like $5,000, something like that. But Honky Tonk Man made quite a big payday on that, I believe. I hope he did. Yeah,
it probably depends on who you are. Well, that's very interesting. Well, I know you were only going to talk about 45 minutes about him, and it's almost 55 now. Is there anything that we've missed about Billy? There's a fan on here that wants to know, in your opinion, did any wrestler ever have a better body in the history of wrestling than Billy had in the late 70s?
No, I do not believe so. Not when Billy was with the WWF, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, with Vince Sr. And when they did that cross promotion with Harley Race and the NWA and Billy with the WWF, I don't think at that time, I don't think anybody could have, unless it was a 1974 feud with Wahoo. Billy Graham was a WWF champion then too, and he was the best of the best. And period, I don't think anybody can compete with Billy body-wise in pro wrestling history. I mean, Hogan didn't have any kind of body compared to superstar Billy Graham, you know?
No, Warriors was good. Warriors was pretty good. Batista, I would say he's too bulky. I wouldn't even put Batista over Billy. I would say the only one that came close, and he didn't have as big arms as Billy, was the Warrior. Because you had a great body for sure, but just compared to the amount of stuff that Billy, a lot of it had to do with the amount of stuff that he took to. But he just had such massive arms in his peak.
Well, you have to cycle on steroids. That's one thing I always did. I took 12 weeks off, and I don't know if Polk ever did, or Ultimate Warrior ever did. I do not know. I just know I cycled 12 weeks on, 12 weeks off. So you look good, you start to go down, and you look in the mirror, and you get back on after 12 weeks. Some guys who were on it year round, paid the price, the heavy price for it. And you know what? I'm probably not going to be around much longer. The old school's dying off. And Billy Graham, that's what this is all about today, Hannibal. I just wanted to give the eulogy because I know I won't be there, and just tell the world just how great a human being as superstar Billy Graham was. And by far, him and Wahoo and Blackjack Mulligan and Harley Race are the Wahoo McDaniel. They're all just my heroes, man.
And as you said, Warrior, I like the Warrior as a wrestler, but he passed away at 54. So yeah, there is a price to pay for having physiques like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is, and you hear about the Warrior in my autobiography. So I will tell you this: it's always an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. And I just hope the fans understand honesty, because that's what I try and give the fans. And without the fans, you can't have pro wrestling. So they deserve to know inside the ring, inside the ropes, what happens in the world of pro wrestling. But I prefer to talk to you because you've been down the road and know what it's actually like. And, Bill, after George Neapolitano made my career with the magazines, I just didn't follow up with it because I had other things going on in my life. But superstar Billy Graham, there'll never be another one. I'm repeating myself, but there'll never be another superstar Billy Graham. They'll remember Hulk Hogan, but to me, and I hope the wrestling world never forgets superstar Billy Graham, because he paved the way for all these other professional wrestlers to make it. And a lot of them, like you said, took his gimmick. That's just shows you how great of a wrestler, pro wrestler Billy Graham was.
And I think as far as the legacy over time, Billy Graham definitely has the cleaner legacy too, as far as a lot less controversies than Hulk Hogan ultimately had in his career. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I know Billy, I know that you guys had a few disagreements here and there, but the last few times when I passed messages on to you, to Billy from you, he appreciated it. And I know just before he passed, his webmaster who went down there to see him passed a message on from both me and you. So he definitely would appreciate that you took the time to speak about him for an hour and his amazing legacy that will never be duplicated. So I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to say to close this off. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you bet, Hannibal. I just wish that I would have had the chance to get on Donahue with Billy, because he tried real hard to get me on there with him, and they already had the plane ticket, first class plane ticket for me to go down there, but I got to cash it in, keep the money, but I really wanted to go on there and confront Vince like Billy did. But Billy, all the pain and all the effort that he had in pro wrestling. And then towards the end, everybody thought he was going to die 10 years ago. There's not a stronger guy that hung on longer and loved life better and competed better in pro wrestling and in life and as a husband and as a true man than Superstar Billy Graham. And that's my eulogy to Billy. And I just cannot say another word. I love the man with all my heart. That's it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of